A Model Revisited. By Roage. I will not go over the material offered in the video presentation, but I do want to address some of the ideas that relate to when power is expressed and when it is not expressed, and we need to revisit the diagrams in the presentation. From the video, the first model, see Figure 1, shows all the components. Figure 1, Ego-Dominated Persona. This model shows the typical individuated facet we know as an individual man or woman with an ego persona dominating and filtering their input from the universe. Figure 2 shows a self-dominated man or woman absent of the ego clutter that inhibits connection to the self. Figure 2, self-dominated man or woman. Hold that image in your mind as I am going to improve upon it and simplify the model. Now understand, these are models that are used to help people see things in multi-dimensions, and do not attempt to show exactly what it would look like, because we do not have a brain that will allow us a connection to the mind that can comfortably handle more than 3 dimensions. Figure 3 shows the starting point, oblivion. It was the easiest part of the series to represent. It is the absence of everything. Figure 3, oblivion. For whatever reason, an event occurred that created a something in oblivion. It is the universal consciousness, the universal mind, the universal self that for consistency I will call the supreme authority or supreme authority. All that is encompassed by the supreme authority. We cannot know if there is something outside of the supreme authority, and it is academic at this point to think about. Figure 4, supreme authority. Within the supreme authority is a singular point of awareness that is the focus of the universal consciousness that I will call the observer. Figure 5. Figure 5, universal consciousness, the observer. Now look back at Figure 2 and note the similarities between the diagrams. This observer is awake and aware of it. One thing to note: the supreme authority is what I refer to as being the top entity in the all. I hesitate to use the word God because that word has been mangled and abused. Most of what we call God has more to do with man and exhibits far too many human characteristics for my particular comfort, and I am sure I am not alone in that. The initial challenge for this supreme authority being was that oblivion did not come equipped with a mirror, and the supreme authority had no way of seeing itself and knowing what it was and the properties of the place it found itself. This is a dangerous time because the supreme authority does not know what it was capable of and did not know to what extent its power could be exerted. A danger is that the possibility exists that the supreme authority could end it itself if it engaged in expressing power in a way that would end itself. It requires a test bed or a place to explore aberration without succumbing to it, and creating a containment zone for mistakes to be made such that they can run their course within experience without having a negative impact. What we know as the universe is one such containment zone. There may be more, and that also we cannot know. See Figure 6. Figure 6, our universe. The supreme authority or universal self has complete awareness as the universe is a creation within its own mind. It has rules and entities I call stuff. Enter a man with his ego persona. Figure 7. Figure 7, man in our universe with ego persona. In this diagram there is a single man, and what he sees in the universe is mangled by the ego. Again, there is but one self, and the man has limited connection to the singular mind. As the man learns throughout its life, normally they gain more access to more of the mind. That can also be reduced if the perceptual tool, the brain, is damaged as a function of that man's experience and experimental test. Let us just work with a man that has conquered the ego so he is not subject to the ego filtering. See Figure 8. Figure 8, one man in our universe with no ego filtering. Adding another man or woman to the universe is shown in Figure 9. Figure 9, 2 people in our universe. And so on. Figure 10, many people in our universe. Each body appears in the universe as separate and distinct. It is not given physical senses to detect otherwise. It appears to each man and woman as if they are separate. They each have an individual channel, the singular observer and the singular self. Here is the cool thing. We are just one being that has fooled itself into thinking we are many. That which I call me is the same thing you call me. It just feels different, as this me is simply looking down individual channels. This is how one self can experience many selves. Also, a multitude of experience and tests can be conducted through the interplay between these selves. Since the universe exists only within the mind of the Supreme Authority for the benefit of the Supreme Authority, then how much potent free will does an individual man or woman actually have? 0. The ego creates the illusion of potent free will, but we serve the Supreme Authority and it only appears to the ego as random chance and accident. This is why people who are able to manage their egos see the purpose and direction their lives take. There are no accidents. No, also it is not concretely scripted either. Each man's life is scripted and modified to harvest the maximum benefit. One of the questions I get regularly is, why must the sight be read aloud? Do not the words themselves have power? Yes, they have power, in our minds. Until they are acted upon, then that is the only place they have power. Do they change behavior? Yes, they may, but a word in a closed book or that remains in one's mind is easily forgotten and is rendered powerless. This is why many say, "Wow, Roage, you have reminded me of so many things I have forgotten." The reason they were forgotten and will be again is that they were not used to impact the universe or the experience of another. Unfortunately, most will only read silently and not read out loud. What happens when one does that, especially those who are still shackled with the ego? The ego is quite effective at filtering out non-status quo information coming into a brain through one of our senses. We read with our eyes and into the ego, and whatever fits the status quo becomes retained in the mind. Reading aloud is a multifaceted stream of information that overwhelms the ego such that new information can be introduced. Here is why it works. When reading aloud, the information hits the brain via the visual cortex. Then the brain must interpret and marshal the speech centers to speak the words. Then the words come back into the brain via the auditory centers. This is 3 parallel processes acting simultaneously and a little out of time sync. This is too much for the ego to deal with. One can introduce and retain new information without having the ego continually on the dump button. Since sound is no longer just a thought, it actually creates ripples and constitutes a physical action. This is an actual physical expression of power in the universe. The other reason spoken words are important forms the basis that all real contracts are verbal. Just as the Supreme Authority uses thought to create the universe and is protected, we ourselves can entertain all manner of mental atrocities that do not subject us to any real physical negative experience. It is not a real contract until it leaves the realm of our thoughts and enters the physical. This is true for any physical act that results from our thoughts. This affords us the same kind of protection as the Supreme Authority enjoys within the universe. It is vital to have a buffer that does not commit us to an action or a place we can think without acting and being bound. The recognition of we being one goes to the heart of undermining the primary weapon the ego uses to subvert self-control. The ego is intimately aware of what frightens and exploits that fear to maintain control over our experience. Those in esoteric circles who study consciousness know that the ego is a recent actor in consciousness, and I currently hold the belief that the ego is almost like a foreign invader that has been used to gather the most aberrant of experience. The atrocities that man commits and the inhumanity he exhibits can be dated to about 30,000 years. For man to grow, man must enter a new stage of consciousness, self-consciousness. We have spent the time required to harvest the dark aspects of experience and learned much about the thoughts and actions that cause an ending. One by one, each of us will either succumb completely to an ego-dominated life or a self-dominated life. One way is as valuable as the other. The ego itself was harnessed to give us an arm's length separation from the self, and we could not have gathered the experience we have gathered without that separation. The depravities were necessary to experience and learn from. Now things are changing and we are to all return and judge what was collected. The implications of the changes that are occurring are mind-boggling, and it is a wonderful time to be. That is, if one is fooled into believing in time.